Hello, my name is Ryan Moody. I'm a senior at University of Maine Augusta in the bachelor's program for mental health and human services. Actually, this is my last official course in the program aside from the internship, which will be wrapping up next semester, so that's quite exciting. I also work as a uh, residential manager at Ironwood, which is a residential treatment center for teenagers aged about 13 to 18 years old. A variety of different aspects that we treat there, from substance abuse to uh, behavioral problems and things that come hand in hand with those things. So it's been very exciting. I've been doing that for about 4.5 years as I've been going to school, and get to use a lot of the things that we work on in school in my daily work, which is also very rewarding. Uh, for today's topic in therapeutic activity, I had actually already done an activity analysis on this, and that is we're going to talk about writing a song as a therapeutic tool. I have done this for myself, and I have also helped residents at work utilize this. I wish that I could have actually put together something with that specific group. However, confidentiality, obviously not allowed to video them and play them back to you. So we will go ahead and go forward as if I had them doing the activity. I do have at the end an opportunity for a link to a YouTube video that I have recorded, for a song that I wrote for myself with some struggles that I've had in my life. And I did find it very therapeutic and a good release to be able to share with other people what that felt like to go through. And kind of the inspiration for why I chose kind of repeating this activity, I guess, to go into further depth with versus coming up with something different. I would play it for you live, but I've got a bit of a cold and keep losing my voice, so I'll revert back to the video that I made a few months ago and let you watch that. I don't know how to tie it all into this video, so there will be an added link, I guess, in my final presentation for you. The first part that we need to do if we were sitting down as a group to do this together is to kind of come up with a subject matter for the song. Do we want it to just be something fun? Do we want it to be something that uh, gets a little deeper? Something like I did was to take some of the feelings and emotions around substance abuse and put that into my song. And then later into the song, I delved into how my family and my wife and all the people around me really have helped to make that battle successful, and how that feels. So there's a couple of different avenues we could look at. If I were leading a group through that, I would work with a group and say, hey, what do you want to do? Would you like to just do something for fun and just kind of vent out some energy, or do you want to tackle maybe something that the group's been struggling with? I would assume be very beneficial for a group that is kind of geared towards a common thread, such as, let's say, PTSD or substance abuse, or if there's some sort of support group, that may also be an avenue where people can vent, so to speak. Once we have an idea, once our brainstorming is done, then we get to the meat and potatoes of writing the song. And you can go a few different ways with it. There should be a basic rhythm and melody that will go along with it. This can be provided through instruments if the group has the musical ability. It can also provide if we had a lot of vocal talent, it could provide their rhythm and melody with alternating vocals. um, it really depends on the group's abilities and experience level as to how the song is written. um, in most settings, I would recommend just a simple verse and chorus, where we have a verse that's kind of dealing with the subject matter, maybe a little more metaphorically. Well, it could be literal, I suppose. And then a repeating chorus in between the verses that kind of deals with the topic of the song. In my particular song, it was actually two extended verses with contrasting themes. They're similar lyrics, but one is the kind of rise of my drinking, and then the other is the fall and the rebuild. So they're two lengthy verses, but with a very similar pattern to them. Um, in typical songwriting, usually the verses will have some sort of a rhyming element. If you do have a group that's a little bit more experienced or wants to take it to a little bit different level, you can always add, like pre-chorus in there. You could add a bridge in the middle of the song that is contrasting to the rest of the song. It really depends on the group's ability and desire, to do that. Uh, Once we've gotten to that point, obviously the equipment you're going to need to write the song would be pen and paper. Um, if you had specific instruments that the groups wanted to play or had of their own that could be provided, obviously you could use that. If you got really fancy, you could use PA equipment and such to amplify the song, depending on how loud of an area or how large of an area and how loud you needed it. Um, it really, really again comes back to the level of experience and ability in the group. Um, if you were going to record the song, you would need some sort of an element, whether it be video recording the song. I have a small interface that I plug into my computer that I can run through the amplifier that I use and through the PA, and that will record everything that I'm playing through that and save a WAV file to the computer. So there's a few different avenues you could go there. Um, the activity can be either masculine or feminine. There's really, it dependent on the group. Um, it's relatively simple to complete. There are some emotional parts that, sometimes will hit you a little bit and slow down the process. But it's a relatively simple process and should really be geared at, a good release and a good energy coming out of it. Um, the writing of the song is really just a one-time event. However, it can be repeatedly performed, and often, if the group is comfortable with it, I would, such as I've done at work when we've written a song, um, I would write it with the performance in mind. Sometimes it's fun to just write down lyrics and get them out of your head, but sometimes it's fun. I say that as a musician. Um, but sometimes it's really you want to write it as if you were going to perform it to an audience, because that's when you're going to get your best work to come out, the things that you really want to share. Um, it has a high chance of success given that I really the group should have a good time in doing it. There should be a good degree of collaboration. It really is not a very expensive thing to do. In a group setting, really, it can be as basic as a pen and paper and just singing all together, and even tapping out a rhythm on the desk. I feel that it has a great opportunity for people to be creative and expressive. It, even those without a lot of prior experience, once they get into the songwriting, it's a good chance for them to come out with some lyrics and some feelings and express themselves, and take part in that. Uh, I apologize. My printer broke, or I would have printed this off. So I'm utilizing my computer here with my outline on it. There is a degree of decision making that is involved in the songwriting process. A lot of it comes around the subject matter. A lot will come with the lyrics, especially probably in the verses, something that may be a little bit more metaphorical and not necessarily a literal meaning. Um, and there'll be some decision making on how the group wants to express that. If they want to keep it light and fun to listen to, if it wants to be a little more somber, if it wants to be serious, however, that will be up to the group. Um, there might be some decision making as to who does what for roles. Maybe not everybody has musical talent, so they may not prefer to sing, but they great, expressing themselves, in writing, and choose to be writers. Might be people that play guitar, play drums, whatever that might do that as well, and make that their role. So there's some decision making in that as well. Um, it can take several sessions for this to go through, or it can be very quick. Myself as a writer, once I sit down to do it, I'm pretty quick at writing a song. I've written a few, and once the juices get flowing, it just comes out, and I usually just don't stop until it's done. But if it's especially if it's a larger group and there's a lot of input, it could take a few sessions to write it, and then really be a few sessions of practicing it before it's performed, or even just to continue to practice it and enjoy the aspect of playing together. The physical aspects of the activity are pretty minimal. I mean, standing, sitting. I suppose if there are, aspects of, setup involved, such as, PAs, microphones, instruments getting set up, and amplifiers, things like that, there would be some movement. But for the most part, the group could be sitting down, and doing it. So it's a fairly low key physical demand. Parts of the body that be used would be like, obviously your mouth. If you're singing the song or talking, your hands, arms, legs. If you're standing and performing. There's not a lot of motor coordination, really. I suppose for writing, in the songwriting aspect, that would come more for people that play instruments. So for example, if you're trying to play guitar and sing like I try to do, it can take a lot to get the pieces put together. So there is a varying degree of difficulty in that. It doesn't require much in the way of speed, balance, strength, endurance, those types of physical facets. It's more of a social setting, really, in this environment, and it's for me, it's about the group collaboration. When I've done this with a group before, and it depends on the size of the group, how much social interaction there really is. If you have a larger group, it may be hard for one or two people to really dominate it. Um, on the flip side, if it's a small group of, say, 3 or 4 people, then everybody's going to have a fairly high degree of input in the songwriting, and will likely need to be more vocal and more out there versus leaning back in the shadows. Um, Cognitive and perceptual aspects will include a high level of creative expression. That's probably my favorite part of utilizing this as a therapeutic activity. Um, you really get to have an open slate in front of you when you do this. Um, I chose in my song, to entitle it "The Wall," and there's a lot of metaphors in there, to walls that were put up and torn down and rebuilt, that are obviously not literal walls made of 2x4s and sheetrock, but metaphoric walls, and there's ways for me to be able to express that, and I found that very thought provoking when I sat and did that. It wasn't just simple, straightforward things. It would be, how can I tie this all together? So there was a good degree of cognitive ability involved in it for me, and has been. And I've noticed that when I've done it with a group as well, that there's a degree of cognitive ability that kind of shines forth in the group, and kids that I've worked with doing it, there's you can see them kind of pondering, and all of a sudden the light bulb goes on, and they just get very excited, and that they've made that connection on how to throw something in there that would be expressive and interesting and whatnot. Um, as far as perceptual skills, really, things like spatial recognition, making sure you're not leaned right up against the person next to you, that if you need to play an instrument and move about, that you have the space that you need. Um, Auditory discrimination, and you do need to be able to hear a little bit of the tone of the music. Um, if you're, if you had a group of people singing it, for example, they would obviously want to try to keep the rhythm and um, tone and key of the song. So there is a little bit of auditory discrimination that they do need to use. Um, there's a lot of the facets of human being that we talked about earlier in the course that come into play when you do this type of activity. I, First off, group skills. If you're doing this in a group, there does need to be positive group interaction. Certainly could be some conflict in there, I'm sure. But there will also be the conflict resolution that they will learn and meet. Need to be able to express emotions and try to interact comfortably in that group setting. There's also sort of the recreational factor. For me, I do some performing outside of the house, but it's fairly rare. But I do it more because I love it. Some days when it's a rainy day and I've got nothing to do, it's fun to just pull out one of my guitars and sit and play and sing and maybe learn a new song, something along those lines, or write a new song. So there is a recreational aspect to it for sure. When I've done this with kids, it's been the main focus really is the making it fun, because kids like fun even if it's a serious matter. As there's also a degree of intimacy, because you do need to share pieces of you at times in these settings, depending, like I have in my song. So there is an intimacy that you're sharing with that group that also meets that facet. Um, like I said, the therapeutic goals, it can be a variety of different things, from creative expression and just prompting somebody to express themselves in a group versus hiding in the corner. It could be just that outlet of getting everything out there and your story told without having to go up to people and say, hey, I used to do drugs, or I have been sexually abused, or I have what have you. Um, there's a way in this activity, a really strong way to communicate that without actually having to say, I did this, and feel that shame or sorrow or whatever it is that might not be the fun emotion or the good emotion behind it, positive emotion, but to just be able to tell your story and get it out and not feel like you're bottling it up. So for me, that's one of the main therapeutic goals. I feel like there's a degree of self-confidence that is built by doing it, um, especially when you get that first piece of feedback. Myself, I wrote my song, and the first time that I played it for my mother and father, I played it for my wife, their reactions for me just built confidence. It was like, wow, I actually did a good job. Maybe I'll share this with other people. And I've shared it. I have it on YouTube. I've played it before for people, and um, send it to people that are important to me, and getting their reactions built a lot of confidence in wanting to do this again sometime. There's a sense of pride in just creating something and seeing it through to the end. Um, that's also very therapeutic, even if it's not um, dealing with the subject matter directly, just that pride of being a part of something that was meaningful. And there's, I don't know if this would be a positive for everybody, but there's also the performance piece of it, performing in front of the group and with the group. That may be nerve-wracking for some and beneficial for others. The activity can be effective with many different client populations. Children especially, I think music is a great way to get kids to express themselves. If you think of a teenager, for example, I mean, sometimes their expression is through their iPod and through the music that they listen to. That's how they identify. So this is a great way, especially for kids, but it can work really with any age range. I think perhaps the younger population might be more willing to put themselves out there. I know for me now, at my age, it took a little more oomph out of me to actually play this in front of other people. The songwriting itself was easy, but the performance was a little bit more like, where when I was 5 years old, I probably would have jumped up and down singing it in front of a whole audience. Um, It can also be, a variety of different therapeutic groups that this is effective for. Like I mentioned earlier, substance abuse, past trauma, uh, groups of self-esteem problems, for example. Getting that confidence and pride out of doing this, it could be very therapeutic for that particular group. Working with teens, a lot of the teens that I work with, a lot of the underlying problems are self-esteem and poor confidence. So it's very good for that. The activity can easily be modified too, depending on the skill set of the people that you're working with. If you have a group of high functioning people that are very musically inclined, you can modify it to that degree and have people writing, rhythms and melodies for the guitar or bass or drums or piano or whatever you utilize. You could utilize different vocal ranges and create contrasting effects with vocals there. It could be modified physically if you have a group that's maybe not very literate or not very good readers or writers. You could have one person that's the strongest writer in the group be the writer, and everybody just dictates and they write it down. So there's numerous ways that you can modify it to meet the needs and abilities of the group, which I also enjoy about the activity. Is really anybody can take a part in it. It just might require a little degree of tweaking to make sure that they are able to do so. So that, in a nutshell, is what it takes and what it's about to write a song as a therapeutic activity for a group. Um, Again, I've found it very rewarding when I've worked with kids doing it. It's fun for me to sit back and watch them um, throw out ideas. Sometimes, especially with kids, they come out really silly and goofy, and that just as you're at that point of like, all right, guys, let's get back on track. All of a sudden, somebody ties that goofiness to they'll throw out a line that is tied to something that we're actually working on, and then all of a sudden the creative juices just get flowing and the kids take off. Um, so it is a very enjoyable activity for me to watch and very creative, and hopefully you pay it some mind someday if you're ever in a group setting, especially if me personally, for example, I have a lot of musical love, and I'd like to say talent, and so as such, I'm a little bit more driven to want to share that with other people, and be a part of that creative process instead of just sitting back and watching it work. So uh, I hope you enjoy the video. Like I said, I apologize if my voice wasn't so scratchy. I'd probably dig out my guitar and play it for you. But I'll put a video up, a link to my YouTube video up rather in the final presentation, and feel free to watch it. And hopefully you're able to use this someday. I thank you very much. You have a good day and a happy holiday season.